Good afternoon. We stand here on a fair day on a sloping hillside in a quiet park, husbands and wives, mothers and daughters, politicians and community notables. You are the sons and daughters, the inheritors of a tragic peace. You gather here by the grave of a man you never knew, in memorial of a moment most of you couldn't possibly imagine. But some of us have seen such moments. And no matter where they fall on the arc of history, we value them as if they were our own. So here we stand. But why? September 17th, 1862, the single bloodiest day in American history. 23,000 confirmed dead. You call it Antietam or Sharpsburg. We had other names for it. The cornfield, the bloody lane, the east and west woods. I was there with the 12th Massachusetts. There were 334 of us at the beginning of that dreadful battle. At the end, there were 110 left alive. I wasn't one of them. Before the battle, I wrote home, "It is dreadful to contemplate being killed on the field of battle without a kind hand to hide one's remains from the eye of the world or the gnawing of animals and buzzards." There wasn't time. There weren't enough men to bury us all. They dug shallow trenches and laid us in side by side. There was no way to know who we were, unless you were lucky and had a letter from home in your pocket, and someone took the time to look for it. But I didn't. A photographer came and he took 70 photographs before all the dead were laid to rest. Those pictures went to a studio in New York, owned by a man named Mr. Brady. People flocked to see those photos. Some came because they'd never seen anything like it. Others came with magnifying glasses, looking for their sons, their husbands, their brothers. The New York Times of October 20th, 1862 wrote, "Mr. Brady has done something to bring home to us the terrible reality and earnestness of war. If he has not brought the bodies and laid them in our dooryards and along the streets, he has done something very like it. As it is, the dead of the battlefield come up to us very rarely, even in dreams. We see the list in the morning paper at breakfast, but dismiss its recollection with the coffee. There's a confused mass of names, but they're all strangers. We forget the horrible significance that dwells amid the jumble of the type." I wasn't in any of those photos. My family all lived in Boston, so they wouldn't have seen me. I feared I'd been forgotten. The war ended and many of the hastily dug burial sites became exposed. The people of Sharpsburg began to think that something had to be done. The state of Maryland agreed to buy the property and dedicate it as a cemetery. On September 17th, 1865, the 5th anniversary of the battle, the cemetery was ready for the dedication ceremonies. But it wasn't until 1868 that Decoration Day was celebrated for the first time at Sharpsburg with a parade. Some of the local ladies coming out to do as General John Logan had asked and strew our graves with flowers or otherwise decorate the graves of comrades who died in the defense of their country. That's when I began to think that maybe my fallen comrades and I hadn't been forgotten. So here we are today, a long way from Maryland, and gathered around the final resting place of Private Best, a fellow Union soldier. It gives me comfort to know you gather here annually to remember us. It's not Decoration Day anymore, but Memorial Day, a day of remembrance. It makes sense to me. It brings me some comfort. 150 years on, I still believe in the cause that we fought for. But the passion that I had against the rebels, well, that's sort of gone out of me. I've had some time to think about the war and what it meant. But nothing I say here can rival the great words of Abraham Lincoln, who delivered a short address in 1863 at the dedication of another cemetery in Gettysburg. If you folks don't mind, I'd like to read it for you. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal.
Now we are engaged in a great civil war,
testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men living and dead who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note, nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. Thank you.